And we are live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm Suzanne Grant-Lewis, the director of UNESCO's International Institute for Educational Planning, known as IIEP, and it's really delightful to have you back with us. This is our first strategic debate since the pandemic. We were last with you on the 3rd of March, and so we're really pleased that you were able to join us today as we come back to our regular series of strategic debates. Of course, during that time, in this intermittent period, a lot has changed in the world, and we're here to talk about some of those changes. The COVID-19 pandemic created the largest disruption of education systems in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries and on every continent. Closures of schools and other learning spaces have impacted 94% of the world's student population, up to 99% in low and lower middle income countries. During this pandemic, educational planning has needed to adapt rapidly. As schools closed worldwide, governments prepared contingency plans to deal with the immediate and short-term consequences. Today, while some school systems are reopening, they continue to operate under unprecedented circumstances. From Kenya, Jordan to Myanmar, UNESCO IIEP is supporting ministries of education in many ways to maintain the continuity of learning during COVID-19. Now it's time to take a look back at the experience to date, analyze what has worked well, and what conclusions can we draw for the future of educational planning during this protracted pandemic and beyond this current crisis. So I'm going to just speak very briefly on the format of today. And to remind you, we have simultaneous interpretation, English and French. It's available. On the bottom of your screen, you should see a globe. Please choose the language of your choice. And then you will hear either and if you're bilingual, you can keep it on open and you'll hear whatever language is being spoken. The panel will be in English, but at some point we may have some French speakers speaking. Secondly, we do want to hear from you. So please ask your questions in the chat and we will pass them on during the Q&A question and answer period of the format. And thirdly, we are recording this on YouTube and we will promote it afterwards, sharing the link, etc. So this recording will allow many other people to also hear this event. A word on the format. So we're going for very much a discussion format. We've asked each of the three panelists to come up with brief opening statements to kind of summarize the situation in their country. And then we're going to have exchanges on three main topics. The first is the role of educational planning as a support during crisis. Then we'll talk about plan implementation challenges, which I know is of great interest to everybody. And then thirdly, what are the lessons for the future? Following that, the sort of interview format, we will be then opening it up for questions from the audience, which we receive through the chat. And then we will close. The whole event is expected to take 2 hours. So again, thank you for being with us. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce the three speakers, colleagues, senior professionals from Jordan, Kenya, and Myanmar. Dr. Yusuf Abushar is the Director of Planning and Educational Research and Development in Jordan's Ministry of Education. In this position, he leads and manages the Education Development Section team to continually develop tools, methodologies, and approaches. Prior to this leadership position, he served as the head of the Division of Institutional Performance Monitoring and Evaluation and coordinator of Development Coordination Unit. Dr. Yusuf earned his doctoral degree in business administration from the Red Sea University. Second, I'll introduce our Kenyan colleague, Mr. Elias Abdi Jalal. He has served since 2018 as the Director General of Kenya's State Department of Early Learning and Basic Education. In this capacity, he leads all technical directorates in the State Department of Early Learning and Basic Education. Mr. Abdi previously served as Deputy Director in the Directorate of Policy, Partnership, and East African Affairs, and was Acting Chief Executive Officer in the National Council for Nomadic Education in Kenya, NACONEC, and later Director of Projects Coordination and Delivery in charge of all donor-funded projects in the Department of Basic Education. Before joining the Ministry in headquarters, Mr. Abdi was a high school principal for 13 years and was awarded Principal of the Year for Northeastern Kenya in 2012. Our third panelist is Mr. Kolewin, or Sayargi Kolewin. He began his career in education over 25 years ago as a primary teacher and then a senior teacher. In 2001, he became Deputy Planning Officer, and he rose through the ministry in progressive positions as a planning officer.
Où il a eu 3 positions en tant que responsable de la planification.
I'm hearing the French on the...
J'entends le français dessous.
I'm hearing the French. Okay, let me go back.
Bien, je vais revenir un peu en arrière.
Introductions, serving as planning officer.
Donc, il a été responsable de la planification, directeur adjoint de la planification,
and deputy director general for human
resources DG adjoint de la planification.
Served as the director general of Myanmar's Ministry of Education.
Directeur général au ministère de l'Éducation du Myanmar jusqu'en 2019. L'interprète français signale qu'elle n'entend plus sous lorsqu'elle parle.
On the panel. Okay, it's now time to hear from each of these panelists with an opening statement. We have asked them to focus on 2 things. How has your ministry responded to the COVID-19 pandemic to ensure educational continuity? And what's the situation now? Have schools reopened? What are the plans for the immediate future? So we're first going to hear from Dr. Yusuf Abu Shar. Please, Dr. Shar.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the IIEP and the principal of IIEP for this great panel where we needed. In a long time, we didn't have such a panel with experiences like the IIEP people. I'm very grateful for being with you all, and hope we will have some good experience from our country, from all countries. And first of all, I would like to say that there was a real direct command and direct supervision from our King Abdullah, His Majesty. I would like first to thank all the leadership what we had here in Jordan through this pandemic. Actually, using such experience in leadership that was really needed, and this is very. We had a good lessons and we had a good way of dealing with everything through the pandemic. As there was a lockdown actually in Jordan in March, and everything was stopped, and even the education, but rapidly and fast, the Ministry of Education was working on distance learning, and first of all, we had 2 TV channels to be established after maybe 1 week of shutting down or lockdown in Jordan. Then there was a third, which was supported from Jordan TV, and there was 3 channels broadcasting in Jordan. Plus, there was platforms established here in Jordan. Actually, yeah, we do have some infrastructure, technical infrastructure in Jordan, but it was not for this specific person of dealing with everything. It was mostly statistics, used for statistics. Then actually, after maybe I can say 1 month, everything was going in distance learning, and we were following up each and every sphere. We had a plan. The plan was actually for response for this pandemic and sustainability. Can I show my slides, if you don't mind?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think you can see now. The first thing what we had done here in Jordan is to resume education for all around the country. Actually, the plan was there for response and sustainability, and it was very very difficult in the lockdown and to reach everyone. You know that it was a sudden for all the country, and even all the countries, I can say. And this is I can say COVID-19 is a kind of debate disease. Like we can't, we used to have some decision which is we don't know what will happen after 1 day, after 1 week, after 1 month. And this is what we try to do in our response plan for this pandemic. We used all the infrastructure what we had, and there was a great point to have a really good cooperation with the private sector here in Jordan, and especially with the used technology, or as they estimated as the technology private sector. We used from our Minister of Technical Telecommunication in Jordan. So we had a combine of private sector and the government and everyone to establish, and the TV of Jordan, of course, and all the partners, external and internal partners. There was great coordination in between, and this was one of the succeeding issues what we had in this pandemic. Actually, we have got platforms. We had 2 platforms, which is Darsek 1 and Darsek 2, and I added to the TV channels in Jordan. Then after that, we actually started to teach to reach everyone all around Jordan, each and every student that he's eligible in this distance learning, and how we can reach every sphere in Jordan. And this was in our plan actually, and there was a good job we did in that way. There was a big plan for them to reach them and to try to find suitable equipment needed in their areas. So this is what we had, and it was, that when we started that, it was really a sudden. I can say we had a full infrastructure for technology, but what we had, we used in a manner that it was really a great combination between the private sector and the government and everyone. And then we started to have some platforms for the teachers, or training material for all the teachers all around Jordan. And we tried to actually give care or give more attention for the parents in the house, and how to deal with this technology. I can say we are trying our level best to reach each and every student. Until now, we are having plans, and we are trying to afford the budgeting for reaching all the children with the new technologies. Actually, I don't know whether I'm exceeding my time or not. You could stop me here.
If you could wrap it up, thank you.
Yeah, so the situation now, I can answer the, actually, unfortunately, we know the second wave of pandemic, what we had, it was really strong on Jordan because we were very, in the beginning, we were very cured not to distribute the spread the pandemic around Jordan. But now I think we are increasing in number, unfortunately, and we hope for the best. Nowadays, we locked the school for 14 days to see whether how we can handle it, because there was a cases in our schools from teachers and students. We had a good protocol, health protocol, which was distributed among all the schools. Now the teachers are attending the schools. Now we are trying to handle all things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. If you would unshare your screen now, and we'll be able to move on to Mr. Abdi, who's going to tell us, share his opening remarks on Kenya. There we go. Yes, Elias, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Director Suzanne. And I also want to join my colleague in appreciating the role of IIEP in organizing this forum. I just want to start by saying that Kenya was also affected by this pandemic, just like the other parts of and all other countries, just like other countries. Madam Chair, the first case of COVID was identified here in Kenya on the 13th of March. And by the 15th, we as a ministry announced the closure of all our education institutions, right from pre-primary through primary, secondary, up to university education. And we, as a country, closed down all the institutions of learning. And at that time, our Minister of Health had already developed a plan to combat this pandemic. And all sectors, including the education sector, were also required to come up with their plans. And therefore, we domesticated the MOH, Minister of Health plan, and came up with a specific plan that is targeting the education sector, what we are calling COVID Basic Education Response Plan. And this plan basically was to bring all the key players of the sector together, a plan with the interventions, activities, strategies that will do a section on, of course, resource mobilization and monitoring. It was a very comprehensive plan. As a result of that plan, we were able to link up with partners like the Global Partnership for Education, and we managed to get some grant from the GP to the tune of $11 million to assist us to roll out the responses that we had put in the plan. And therefore, as a country, we all our learners have been affected. We have got over 30,000 public and private primary schools, over close to 10,000 secondary schools. They were all closed, and the pre-primary universities and so on. And when we came up with the plan, one of the things that we, as a country, that we decided to improve on was the remote learning, or what others will call the distance learning. We had our radio broadcast that has been very old. Even in the 80s, we used to have radio broadcasts of lessons. We tried to, build on that. Then, of course, we had a recent invention in terms of the TV channel, for also broadcasting live lessons to students and so on. And then we have a recent development at our Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, where we came up with, uploading resource, education material resource in our education cloud. And that has really improved. So since then, we also went to training our teachers at the lowest level of administration of the education sector. We trained quite a number of teachers. on the use of technology, especially ICT technology in delivering lessons, training them on, for example, apps like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, how to conduct webinars and so on. And we did come up with guidelines for the teachers and so on to ensure that learning at least continues. However, I must point out that we are not, in terms of universal outreach of technology in the country, we are not yet there. There are parts of the country that are not still covered. We as a country, we are still a DCP, a developing country partner, and a number of our households are not even able to access be it radio, TV, and so on. So that challenge was there, and it became, actually we had an outcry, I would say a backlash from the society here, until as a ministry, we were even summoned at Parliament, and eventually we took the decision of, once the school opened, we'll start the syllabus from where we stopped, when face to face. But all the same, we said that, the learners have to be kept busy, because an idle mind is the devil's workshop, especially in the urban areas. Later, maybe in the program, I'll talk about the challenges that we have had with the children staying at home and all that. But all the same, we also responded by coming up with a comprehensive guideline, a guideline for education institutions, for the institutional administrators and so on how now the institutions have to be compliant in form of the must-haves in the schools, what is to be there in terms of social distancing, in terms of the requirements of the health protocol. The Ministry of Health also seconded some medical doctors to the ministry that have been guiding us to come up with a guideline. And so that in schools, for example, how should our learners, our teachers behave in shared facilities like washrooms, like the dormitories, in the classrooms, and so on. We came up with a comprehensive guideline on that. Not only that, we've even gone to the extent of coming up with modules that are targeting teachers, a module that's targeting learners in terms of what they should know about the disease. What is COVID? How is it spread? How can you stay safe? Suppose you get the symptoms. How will you react? I mean, how will you handle yourself? And so on. We have paired our institutions with the nearby health facilities, ensured that our administrators are able to locate the nearest ambulance and so on. And therefore, we have uploaded all the information I'm talking about in our Ministry of Education website. But on the other side, Madam Chair, I also want to point out that because of shortages in facilities, when the schools closed, some of our schools were used as quarantine centers by the Ministry of Health, so that they're able to use them as facilities for quarantining people who have the symptoms or who could have traveled from out of the country. At the moment, Madam Chair, the current situation is that you must have heard that sometimes back, we did announce that the entire academic year will be repeated. But since then, we have learned a lot, because at that time, we had very little information about the disease and its behavior and the pattern globally. And as a result of that, I'm happy to report that starting last week, we have gradually opened our tertiary institutions, the middle level colleges and our universities. And starting this week from Monday, we did open for our basic education institutions on gradual basis. We opened our examination classes, the secondary school examination class, primary school examination classes, and so on. And therefore, at the moment, we are at the position where we are observing and see if we find that the situation allows us to call in more classes. That is what we intend to do in the next 2-3 weeks. Okay. But that is where we are for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdi. I recognize this is an extremely busy time for you with schools opening this week. So thank you for being with us. But I'd now like to call on the colleague from Myanmar, Mr. Ko Le Win.
Thank you, Ms. Susan. Also, I think good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, every participant from the world. So, in terms of Myanmar condition, the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus outbreak a global pandemic on 11 March 2020. After the declaration of WHO, National level Central Committee on Prevention, Control and Treatment of the Coronavirus Disease 2019, led by State Councilor, is on the phone at the March 30 to 2020. On March 30, 2020, Coronavirus Disease the Control and Emergency Response Committee was formed, led by the Vice President. After the technical working group for the COVID-19 prevention and reopening of the school and education sector has been formed by the Ministry of Health and Sport and Ministry of Education. National COVID-19 Response and Recovery Plan for the education sector has been developed to ensure continuity of the quality and equitable education. The strategy and intervention that aim at to ensure education continuity for all learners in Myanmar, to ensure proper planning for the reopening of the education institution and to contribute safer and more resilient education environment. With the slowdown number of the new cases and zero local transmission cases, we began more phase opening, reopening of the basic education school. We started to reopen first by the upper secondary school and then lower and also the then primary piece by piece. Prior to reopening, all basic education high school are assessed based on the checklist, 80-point checklist developed by the Ministry of Health and Sport and Ministry of Education. Technical working group, by the technical working group, if the school meet with the 80-point checklist, receive the grade A, all schools are allowed to open using the standard operating procedure developed by the technical working group in collaboration with Ministry of Health and Sport. Reopening of the upper secondary level school started on 21st July 2020 in the first phase. Department provide digital thermometer based on the number of the students to all schools, install hand washing facility with the soap and hand sanitizer and so on. We also provided two, reusable cotton masks and also face shield for each student to all the students under our basic education, as well as all the teacher and all the education staff we provided. And then starting from July 21st, 2020, upper secondary school, out of the 70,173 upper secondary school, we only open 6,525 upper secondary only. So the student 1.15 million, they have access to learning at the upper secondary level. Due to the second wave, local transmission cases were confirmed on 26 August. On 27 August, all the schools reopened were closed up to now. Not only for the basic education, but also for the other TVET institution, also higher education institution. Based on the current situation and worst case scenario, we have developed learning continuity plan, which focus on the home-based learning by using TV channel, radio, Myanmar digital education platform, social media, distribution of the hard copy textbook to the student and so on. Now, this plan is being implemented according to the guidance of the Ministry of Education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're really appreciative of you putting us up to date. And as you see, colleagues in the audience, these three countries are in quite different stages, all suffering from the pandemic, but trying to respond in different ways. So I'm going to turn now to the first theme of our session, the role of educational planning as a support during this crisis. And I'm asking each of the three panelists in just short, less than 2-minute answers to please answer this question. To what extent do you think you were prepared for such an unprecedented health crisis as COVID-19? What mechanisms were already in place to deal with the crisis? And I'll turn first to Dr. Abushar.
Yeah, hello everyone. As we mentioned before, that this pandemic is a debate pandemic actually. For actually there was as I mentioned before, there was a good cooperation, especially with the private sector and with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Interior, and with our partners from outside Jordan also. Actually, what we do feel that we tried to go back to schools, and we afford each and everything through our health manual, which was distributed among, and there was training on that for each and every school in Jordan. The problem is that, as we can say that it was a daily or weekly, or I can say less than monthly way of planning. Actually, we had this experience as we did the evaluation for the 12th class. It was a national exam, and we brought all the students to attend in the schools, and the high school national exam was held in each and every school which is appointed for this mission. And there was a very good way, like there was no any infected student or teacher those days. And it was strengthening us to go back in our school. So then we used to have 3 or 4 or 3 main scenarios for returning back to school, to see whether we are capable to go on and not on distance learning. We had the blend between distance learning and the usual or the face-to-face learning in the schools. There was actually we tried to have all the schools back, but we had some infections in the school among the student and the teacher. Mm-hmm. Then we had a decision to have the first 3 elementary, as we said it here, student to attend, and only the Tawjih or the high school or the 12th class to attend, only 2. Okay. Where they are needed. We felt that the basic should be started from the early childhood, and we'll go up to the 12th class. Okay. And all the private sector schools and the government sector, we were back only 6 or 7 days back. There was a very increase in the cases in Jordan. Yeah. So again, we decided like to go back to distance learning and for handling it.
Yeah, as you said. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Abdi now. Again, to what extent do you think you were prepared for this unprecedented health crisis? What was already in place that you could build on? Go ahead, Mr. Abdi.
Thank you, Madam Director. To be frank, as a country, we never expected this, just like any other country. And when we were preparing our academic calendar, we never thought that at one point we'll be able to close our schools for 6 continuous months. The longest that our schools were ever closed maybe was a month, especially when teachers go on strike, or that is the challenges we have had in the past. But when this was, something that we, as an education emergency, as a pandemic affecting the education sector, we never, were prepared for this. We, as a country, in the past, we have had challenges that are of emergency nature in the education sector. But I would say those ones were more or less predictable. For example, we have cases where droughts affect our education system, but at least that is predictable. The weatherman will always predict and so on. We have some natural catastrophes like a wind, for example, coming and blowing the roof of a whole school and so on. But all along, we had ways of coping with this. In the ministry, we have the EIE unit, the Education and Emergency Unit, that is made up of a cluster that's made of the ministry and our partners and so on, and would always, respond to it. One time in the year 2007, we had the post-election violence, for example, in our country. And even now, elections are predictable when they come, and we put plans in place to see whether our sector will be affected. But all of a sudden, when we close the schools, learning has been interrupted completely. And many of our parents have lost their jobs. Our private sector, because we have a vibrant private school system, all of a sudden, the teachers who are relying on fees collected for their salaries are out of job. All of a sudden, children are staying long hours at home. And you find these children are, susceptible to abuse, be it child labor, early pregnancy, or early marriage. Because even as we open schools now, we are facing situations where many girls have been married off. All of a sudden, our non-teaching staff, especially in the private schools, and all the institutions have closed up, and the schools are not in use. We do expect, for example, that the dropout rate might, increase and so on. Equally, this country is home to so many refugees, especially in the northern counties, Kakuma, Dadaab, and all that. Quite a number of our children also have special needs. They're having challenges and so on. And therefore, we as a country were really not prepared for this. But the mechanisms that were in place to deal with crisis generally in the education sector was the EIE, Education in Emergency, cluster group that we used to have, and we used to adequately respond to those predictable, maybe calamities that we have been facing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So despite you have Education Emergency Unit, you have experienced crises before, but still this was unprecedented, it sounds like.
Sure,
yes.
That is it.
Right. Thank you. And to our colleague in Myanmar, Mr. Ko Le Win, would you please share with us, how well prepared do you feel you were? You're on mute.
Okay.
There we are, great.
Yeah. I think concerning with the Myanmar situation, after confirming 2 cases, and on the 23rd March 2020, Education Sector, Ministry of Education called for the closing of all schools, higher education institutions and Tibet institutions in late March. Since the crisis unfolded at the end of the 2019-2020 academic year, so it has unfortunately not yet disrupted learning. It has been in the case of many other countries, because at that time, Myanmar has the summer vacation, long holiday summer vacation for 3 months. So however, while the academic year was traditionally commenced in June, the reopening of the basic education school for the academic year 2020-2021 has been delayed due to the COVID-19. Delay has happened. I think that we can prepare some extent by the development of the national response and recovery plan for the education sector, development of the standard operating procedure for the school reopening, as well as the COVID-19 prevention guideline for the school. We can carry out the reduced curriculum by the adjustment, preparing home-based learning material, and establishment of Myanmar digital education platform. Also, we go then develop the DBE box and DBE learner management system, etc. Concerning with the mechanism which we are already in place in our system, the close cooperation and coordination mechanism between the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health and Sport, mechanism for the working together closely at sub-national level to school level among the concerned department under the receptive ministry. Civil society organizations have been established. And then strong reporting and monitoring mechanism for school, township, education, office to the central level department and Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health and Sport has been already in place in this COVID-19 crisis. Over, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to turn to each of you with an individualized question based on the experiences of each of your countries. And first for Dr. Abushar, Educational technology played a pivotal role in ensuring education continuity in Jordan. In your opening remarks, you talked about the platform for the teachers, for the students. Would you tell us a bit more about how technology was used in the country to ensure teaching and learning continued? And all these questions are very brief still, again, 2 to 3 minutes, please.
Yeah, actually, of course, now the technology is playing the main role in reaching and in expanding the data. Actually, we have got a good coverage of internet in all around the country. But I can say only in some areas which is unreachable, but mostly anyway, we can say cover more than 85% of the country is covered by internet. The problem of the equipment of the technology, and this is what we are trying to reach and to support the families with that. And plus we can say that okay, there was a good or needed to be supported in training and all. Actually, now we are dealing not only with the student and with the family, as you know that everybody in the family they are involved in distance learning. The mother will sit with their children to support them. Actually, we used in the Zoom, the WhatsApp, and now we are trying to actually make this way of reaching the children or of the distance learning in a way that it will be interactive, and this is what kind of equality for making the quality of distance learning more effective and more reachable for each and everyone, and we are after to see that everyone is involved in this way of teaching. Now we are trying with our donors and our friends from outside Jordan to support these issues of reaching internet to everyone. Actually, also the teachers, they are we delivered the test box for each and every student. And especially we had this priority for the isolated areas in Jordan to reach the test box for their houses, and still now we are going along with our plans with the response and sustainability both together. Now we are trying to handle and to follow up with all the students. There was a training courses for the students and for the teachers, and on both on the protocol, the health protocol, and in how to use technology in job.
Okay, thank you very much. That gives us a bit more detail to understand what was done in Jordan. Mr. Ko Le-Win, the Ministry of in Myanmar supported a strong focus on home-based learning, as you mentioned. Could you give us a bit more detail so people have a sense of what that was really like?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Susan. The likely closure of the school due to the COVID-19 will directly impact close to 9.7 million students and basic education sector for Myanmar. Moreover, the closure of the Tibet and higher education institution will affect 0.15 million learners in Tibet sector and 1.5 million students in higher education sector in Myanmar. So great affected by the COVID-19 crisis. So starting from July 21st, we are trying to open the upper secondary school. And then we hope that the better case scenario after upper secondary school, we can open lower in primary school. But actually it is not happen. It was not happen because of local transmission in Myanmar. confirmed on 26 August 2020, all upper secondary school open and the whole Myanmar was closed. And also the opportunity for opening of the lower secondary and primary school far away because of the worst case scenario for the COVID-19 crisis. In terms of home-based learning, in the past, we are considering only for the school reopening condition. So the reaching of the school, I think the academic year, so we need to also divide it into which lesson and which subject should be, I think the home-based learning, which subject and which lesson should be school-based learning or something like that. This is for the school reopening condition. We prepare for the home-based learning guideline for the teacher, parents, and students, as well as home-based learning material. Now, the schools are completely closed, and we cannot predict when schools are reopened because of the current situation. The Department of Basic Education, Ministry of Education supported a strong focus on the home-based learning because of school closure, completely school closure. We have to type, there are two types of home-based learning. Home-based learning for the short term, targeted to the student for the refreshing, rememorizing, for the using home-based learning material to support what they have learned last year, mostly focused on primary level. Home-based learning for the long term, we are also considering learning continuity plan by the production of home-based guideline, home-based learning guideline, digital content such as video lesson and radio lesson, distribution of textbook and free of charge. And then all these video and radio lessons will be transmitted by Myanmar Digital Education Platform and Department of Basic Education Learner Management System and Myanmar Education Channel owned by the Ministry of Education, state-owned TV channel, as well as also private TV channel and so on. And social media, we are also used. We also try to distribute textbooks to the all primary and lower secondary students and free of charge. Textbooks are upper secondary level and the student has been already provided because of the opening of the upper secondary school already and free of charge. The textbook cannot support students for the home-based learning. In accord with the Myanmar Ministry of Education policy, we lay down no learning loss in COVID-19 pandemic. Home-based learning is a key activity for the COVID-19 response and recovery plan. Over, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So clearly it was multifaceted, many different inputs to try to support the home-based learning. Thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. Abdi now. Kenya is a very diverse country with a lot of differences across households throughout the country. During the school closures, how did you have students continue to have access to high-tech, low-tech, no-tech learning materials? How did you manage that? And maybe you could give us a bit more information on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our education system, mainly before the pandemic, was relying on face-to-face learning. Of course, even before the pandemic, we have made efforts in ensuring that we integrate technology in delivery of curriculum and in education. And for a long time, we have been offering computer studies as a subject in our secondary schools. We came up even with a digital literacy program in our primary schools. We had a plan of connecting our schools with internet. Before the pandemic, we had connected close to 900 secondary schools to internet. And a lot of effort has been going towards that. But all the same, when this pandemic came into place, we as a country decided to put a lot of effort to improve the use of technology in ensuring that learning continues. And we did release the national timetable for example, the radio and TV broadcast, so that all households and children are able to access the timetable and get to know when lessons are being broadcast live to that. But we as a country have been facing some challenges. For example, internet connectivity is not all over the country. You know, in the urban centers, we are well connected, but going to the rural and the far-flung counties and schools have a challenge of that. We did experience also issues of high cost of data, lack of ICT equipment in our homes, and inadequate ICT skills, especially among teachers themselves and learners. Slow uptake of digital learning is what we have experienced. Equally, our parents were ill-equipped, many of them, for distance and homeschooling. And we had that challenge. And therefore, we realized that this was a challenge that we have been facing to such an extent that as a country, we are learning from this in terms of lessons learned to strengthen our remote learning, to see whether we can, take up blended learning in our institutions, so that as we open, we have both face-to-face and also the use of ICT and in terms of blended learning. We want to, of course, embark on improving our ICT infrastructure in our institutions and so on. And then training the teachers is something that is very important. And the country also has a plan in the next coming years to ensure that there's universal internet coverage in the country, so at least school institutions are able to access internet at that level.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Claire, what you're saying, what you're reporting that Kenya experienced is part of the reason that the Secretary General and his policy brief on education during COVID-19 and beyond recommended that we expand the definition of the right to education to include connectivity entitlement and the effort that's needed globally to remove some of the barriers. So let's look specifically about how the issue of equity, it's a top issue when we support countries in planning. We are all concerned about the impact of the pandemic having quite diverse impacts. And so a question for each of you: what role did equity play as you were setting your priorities for your response in the contingency planning? What was the role of equity? For example, did you pay particular attention to rural populations, or were you really focused on the poor segments of the population? And let me first ask Dr. Abu Shar.
Thank you, Suzanne, for reaching each and every sphere of education needed in this pandemic. Actually, you know that in Jordan there is many camps for Syrian camps and for refugees in Jordan, and there is many rural and poor areas where we try. Actually, we allocated this. This was main issue while doing, and it was there in our plans. And we tried actually to allocate these areas, the poor areas, the areas needed to be strengthening in the internet. Mostly of our schools, I can say, only around 500 schools still not reaching internet, but there is an internet coverage, but it is with the high quality internet we wanted to reach. Actually, in our plan for the rural area, or there is a Bedouin, and where these people they are used to not staying in a particular place, roaming from here to there, and we had some movable movable schools or screens to follow up with this. Fortunately, the teachers, they are really helping us here in Jordan. We actually rely a lot on their rules of catching their students and following up with them their lessons. This was great, and there was a tremendous kind of self or personal issues from the teacher to go to the area where needed, and to give them the classes as usual. And actually there was also kind of incentives for the directors who played a lot of reaching their children. And now we are trying to, as I said before, in the camps everywhere, we are handling of reaching each and every student and give them teaching in a manner way that to make them ready for their future. I can say that many steps we had on this particular issue with our partners, with NGOs, with everyone to settle things in the camps and to reach. And it was really, I can say one thing, that there is more enrolled students, especially in the camps, and this was really tremendous for this year, and we were very happy to reach these students. Actually, till now, the interactive way of teaching on distance learning, now we are focusing on the teaching relationship should be more, we will give it more quality. Blending also, you know, it is the blending between as the student attend and the distance learning, it is needed. We're using the technology in each and every way, trying to even now to have the children attending and use the attendance forms for the students, and this is needed to ensure that each and every student is enrolled and following their studies.
Thank you. That's very interesting, because I think many of us have observed that keeping students engaged even through remote learning is a real issue. And so it's interesting that Jordan is putting more attention to that interaction between teacher and students. Thank you. And now let me turn to Mr. Abdi on the equity question. How to what extent were you paying attention to the equity issues in doing the contingency plans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Equity and inclusion as a thematic area in education, just like access and quality, is very important. And generally, the most vulnerable children have had challenges even in normal circumstances. Our country is diverse in terms of, you know, the people who exist and who are part of this country. We have those communities that are removed from the center, far-flung counties. We have a number of issues when it comes to gender issues, regional imbalance in terms of education provision. We have nomadic communities that tend to move from place to place and migrate with their children. We do have slum dwellers, people in the urban informal settlements and so on. And I would say in terms of education, these are the hardest hit also, the way it is also during normal times. And therefore, as a country, in terms of our planning and response, what we have done is, of course, we did have diversity in terms of the avenue for curriculum delivery, of course, the radio, the TV, and so on. But we also made an effort in trying to avail some print material, revision material to households outside there, especially in our northern counties, with support of our development partners who were able to take and deliver, you know, print materials to schools and so on. And even as we open, now that we have announced opening, those communities that are vulnerable, we are giving them free masks. For example, for the children from these poor households, we are providing a school feeding program to these communities that are also affected and so on. So we are prioritizing when it comes to our country also has availed when it comes to even furniture, desks and chairs in the schools. We are prioritizing communities that are left behind in terms of the challenges of the education sector, and that is what is being issued. And on top of that, our IEE, the emergency education emergency cluster, has also come up with some support from the local education group, the partners, and all that, to target especially the most vulnerable children. And also, we are embarking on a back-to-school campaign, because most likely some of the students may drop out altogether because they are involved in some child labor and so on. And maybe some of them are doing some income generating activities and may not see the need of coming back to school. And therefore, these are things that we intend to embark on once we completely announce the opening dates for all the grades. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Kole Win, what about the equity issue in Myanmar?
Yes, Ms. Susan, absolutely. Equity play important and crucial role in setting priority in the education planning process. Myanmar Ministry of Education used a policy such as no one left behind, no discrimination, no school dropout, and no learning loss. These 4 points of policy we are now using. Using this policy, the special attention was given to the marginalized children, children with disability, children with special needs, children with the move to have access to quality education. Equity is important. For example, we have National Education Strategic Plan 2016-2021 being implemented in Myanmar, starting from development process. We strongly use the equity in every sector, such as early childhood care education, basic education, TVET education, as well as also higher education and so on for setting priority. Now we are developing National Strategic Plan 2021 to 2030. Equity plays a key role in setting priority and identification of the project activity, as well as area focused on the rural, marginalized, internet, and hard to reach area to have access to quality education. I would like to mention some activities such as stipend program for the students from poor family and facility provision for the necessary school, budget allocation for the renovation of school and new school construction, education for the children with the MOOC, ECN program for the children in IDP camp, and so on. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. It's important to talk about the internally displaced populations. A couple of you talked about situation for females, particularly Mr. Abdi. So all these different dimensions, and I'm impressed that the focus on equity has not just been in the response to COVID, but also integrated into the longer term educational planning. So we're going to now move off of the topic of planning as a support during the pandemic to talk about challenges in the implementation of your efforts. And I have asked each of you to come up with 3 words. So that's not even a full minute, 3 words each. What words capture the main challenges you are facing in plan implementation? Dr. Abushar, 3 words.
I don't know whether it could be fitted in 3 words, but I can say the financial resources. This is the main challenge.
Financial.
Second, it is the interactive technology needed. Third is the societal culture.
Social
awareness.
Societal culture. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Abdi.
I would say that our first challenge is resource, financial, human resource, because we have an acute shortage of, around 100,000 teachers, infrastructure. So resource is the first word. The next word is overcrowding in our schools. We, for example, have a school that has 5,000 people with only 51 classrooms. So overcrowding the schools is a major one. Then the third is for us to implement our plan, we planned to provide, the online lessons, the use of technology. So technology is a challenge in our country.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And Mr. Kole Win, 3 words.
Yes, yes. I think in terms of the challenge and plan implementation, the first one is limitation and implementation for worst case scenario of the COVID-19 pandemic situation. The second one is restructuring, redesigning, and rebudgeting of plan activity within the short time. This is also a big challenge for us. And then the last one is not familiar with new normal by the participating people as well as also the student or something like that. Difficulty for the creating enabling environment. There's 3 points as maybe I would like to mention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that's really about the whole system, the enabling environment there. Thank you very much. We are not going as fast as we had hoped, so I'm going to ask just a couple questions in this section. So if I skip you, I'm coming back to you in the next section. Okay. For Mr. Abdi, a question about, we know that during this pandemic, we've had to have much more coordination with health authorities. And Kenya has developed guidelines on health and safety protocols for reopening, for school reopening. And yet I know you've faced these overcrowded schools, like you just said. How did these guidelines get developed? Was it an intersectoral initiative? Then once you had them, how were they disseminated, and what do we know about whether or not they really got owned at the local level? Go ahead.
Thank you. Kenya, it is, our law says that we develop our policies, plans through public participation. And therefore, in the education sector, we have the key players. We have the heads as, heads association, heads of institutions. We do have the faith-based organizations that provide education and sponsor schools and so on. We have the teacher welfare organizations, the teacher training unions, and so on. So it was developed through participatory approach. And as I've earlier said, we have also received the medical doctors who are seconded to the ministry from the Ministry of Health. And we were working very closely with our health practitioners. And therefore, the guideline we developed was very comprehensive, and it is supposed to guide the institutions, and it has a checklist on what they should put in place before opening institutions. The guideline is very comprehensive and is supposed to guide the education management and administrators to ensure that it is at least they receive the guidance. And we released this, we uploaded it in our website. The institutions were able to print it and look at it. And we therefore disseminated it using circulars on, from the Ministry of Education headquarters. We also have asked our teachers to report 2 weeks earlier before students, report to school. And the purpose was to have the teachers at the school so that they are trained on this guideline, so that they plan and prepare to receive the learners, so that at least they ensure there's enough running water in the school, that at least, we're able to monitor the temperatures of the learners and the entire school community on daily basis. And therefore, it is a requirement that the schools implement those guidelines as they have been issued by the government. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So we will hear from inspectors, I guess, whether or not they're seeing actual implementation. Thank you. I'm going to turn to a question for each of you. In your opinion, what type of support provided by your ministry was most critical for implementing the contingency plan, the response to COVID-19? And I'll start first with Dr. Abu Shar. What was it your ministry, in a way it's asking you, what are you most proud of? What do you think you did right? What was the most important thing?
Thank you, Suzanne, and hi to everyone again. Actually, the things, I think what we had now, the electronic contents, what we published in TVs and in our platforms, and this was really a good experience, and what we had it for years and years, we will have it. And this was one of the main issues, and the continuity of developing this kind of classes, and now we are taking care of. The second thing is the training materials. What we had issues in our also platforms. This was very good, and also. Third thing, the development of the MS system. What we had, there was a good concentration on that to have it more supported and more used of it. I can say also about the media, what we had, the ministry played a good role in the media. I was for 10 to 12 times, you know, in the TV of Jordan, and most of my colleagues also is the same. The important issues was really followed by the ministry in the manner not to miss any spare in each and everything of the mixed learn between the schools and distance learning. It was really an experience where nobody will forget, and we are starting a new kind of education systems, and the use of technology here in Jordan is expanded. A lot of families, I can say now, the parents are giving awareness, and I can say also, I don't want to miss the role of the health ministry. They were really helping us, and till this day, since the pandemic started, there is a control room here in the ministry and in the field directorates and even the schools to exchange the data.
Right. That's very interesting, because I know we heard from many ministries during the confinement or the school closure period that knowing what was happening on the ground was very difficult to know, because travel was so restricted. So it's very interesting to hear you say that. Mr. Abdi, what do you think? What type of support from the ministry was most critical for plan implementation?
The support provided by our ministry for ensuring that this proper and critical implementation of the plan was, first of all, we played our coordination role properly in terms of coordinating all the various players and education providers, because we needed to move together as one to ensure that we face this pandemic. And therefore, what we did was we were properly coordinated and have had several virtual meetings, and later, of course, face-to-face meetings that are, of course, observing the social distance and all that. And then secondly, our students and parents were all concerned. So we mounted a proper communication strategy where we are supposed to share information with the parents, the students, the guardians, and the entire education community of the country on the progress and we were working. The education ministry was part of the national COVID response committee, and in there we were working together very closely with other sector players, and therefore as a ministry we were communicating properly. Then secondly, thirdly, with the aspect of resource mobilization, we brought together all the players, domestic, foreign funding in terms of from donors and all that. We mobilized resources, not just in preparation for reopening schools, but also during the closure to see how we can advance the use of technology and fund that and so on. Then, of course, we have had frequent meetings with the key players so that at least we're able to support the education institutions in terms of and ensuring that the plan itself has a steering committee. So we usually also were meeting at least weekly to ensure that we assess ourselves in terms of the implementation of the interventions that have been put in the plan. Thank you.
Susan, please unmute your.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Kolewin, thank you. We trade roles, telling each other to unmute. Thanks. What do you point to for what the Ministry of Education in Myanmar did that was really impacted well the plan implementation?
Yes. Plan implementation, I think that in Myanmar, at the current situation in Myanmar, up to now, I think the confirmed cases maybe 29,000 over confirmed case, and also the recover is 10 over 10,000, and also the death is 664 death. So for the worst case scenario, worst situation, all school and basic education sector and all high school, higher education institution, all training institution for the TVET sector are closed. So I think the township and the state and region are stay at home with the semi-lockdown according to the instruction by the Ministry of Health and Sport. No one can predict that when the schools are open under the COVID-19 pandemic. So now out of 10 months duration of the academic year, only I think 5 months is left. Today is October 30. Therefore, only half of the situation of this academic year is left. For possibility of the opening of the school is far away. So I think the other one is currently all the program implemented by the Ministry of Education maybe have faced a lot of limitation because of the COVID-19, I think the pandemic, and also worst case scenario. So maybe I think so we need to change. We need to reconsider redesigning the activity for using the blended approach or something like that. Ministry of Education fully support to all the implementing activity together with the development partner. Department of Basic Education, Ministry of Education consider the home-based learning is high priority for us. I think to ensure learning continuity of the student in line with the ministry no learning loss policy. For that reason, we have already developed learning continuity plan for the children in the condition of the long-term closure of the school. So this learning continuity plan is for the long-term closure as well as also the medium-term or short-term closure. We need to use that learning continuity plan. So Ministry of Education support and then every necessary resources from possible like necessary budget also I think provided by the Ministry of Planning and Ministry of the Ministry of Finance and Planning, and so everything is now we have to working together according to the guideline of the Central National Level Central COVID-19 Prevention, Control and Treatment Committee led by the State Councilor. Thank you, Opa.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So it's interesting to hear coordination, communication being part of this. And hopefully we'll have a chance. I think we have some questions about consultation, the other C, in terms of to what extent the communities are really participating and having a voice. But we'll get to that in the question and answer period. I'm going to turn now to the future and to try to get your reflections on the lessons for the future. And I'm going to combine two questions and we'll go round for each of you. Do you think that the crisis will impact the way you plan education in the future? And secondly, how can we institutionalize crisis-sensitive planning? This is an area of work that IIEP has worked with each of your ministries on. So two questions. Will the crisis impact the way education planning happens in your country? And how do we institutionalize crisis-sensitive planning? And we'll start first with Dr. Abu Shar. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Actually, this is a great question. This is a question where we have to think, and we are now, as we implementing, as I can say now, is how we will plan for the future. Yeah. And I can say in this aspect that our planning was coordinated with many of our partners or our NGOs who's working in Jordan, the community internally and externally actually. And the big thank is for the IIEP, and we were together developed, and we had the international experience of planning, especially when we issued our ESP. It was from 2018 till 2022, with the great efforts from IIEP, UNESCO, and everyone, all the donors, all the internal and external bodies. And now I think while we are doing some kind of revising on our ESP to be suited for the future terms. How we'll do it? We have got 6 main domains in our ESP, where we can mix both of what we had before and what is needed for the future. And this is very main element needed for the planning for the next phase. Actually, we had some kind of emergency plans, which I mentioned before, and now we are trying to mix the technology in our all components, early childhood, and each and every spare in our ESP. How to do it now? We are still working together. Means how to revise this and what is needed for the future, and how to reallocate even the financial issues and each and every spare to have it more suitable in our coming planning. We'll think about we'll think about the institution of the crisis management in our system. Now we thank God we got approved to have a main section or some kind of unit in the ministry to deal with the database needed for the crisis management. And also I can say that actually we started with also the help of our donors, our colleagues, partners. We did in the field directorate. We had many workshops to deal with the crisis management. Now I think with the coming 2 months or we will have a separate unit which is working on only dealing with the crisis management in the education system among all the fields in the Ministry of Education.
That's very interesting. We were very excited to hear that unit was approved in Jordan. Mr. Abdi, to you now.
Yeah, I would say yes, the crisis will impact on the way we plan. And here in Kenya at the moment, when it comes to education and emergencies, we usually it is in the chapter of the plan, the ESP, that talks of cross-cutting issues. It is not a standalone, aspect in terms of planning. But from what we learned in this pandemic, we will be forced to strengthen our education and emergencies unit. The unit already exists, but we intend to strengthen that. And therefore, we are no longer thinking of maybe having it as a cross-cutting issue, but also maybe moving forward as a complete plan of its own within the ESP. And therefore, we need to look at it properly. I'm sure moving forward, we are also thinking of introducing, the aspect of the use of technology in our pre-service teacher education. We're looking at training the teachers in service teacher education, on the use of technology. We will be looking at the aspect of blended learning in schools and so on. We want to maybe plan and invest in the hygiene in our schools and all that, issues to do with psychosocial support in case of maybe crisis and emergencies for our education institutions and all that. We need to plan for it. And I'm sure as a result of the lessons learned from this pandemic, we intend to make it, a major aspect of our plans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Abdi. Mr. Kole Win.
Yes, absolutely. There's COVID-19 pandemic. The crisis will greatly impact the future plan, mostly in education sector. In my point of view, impact will be happen not only the education plan for the future, but also existing plan now being implemented. For the future planning, we need to consider the new design, new structure, new approach based on the COVID-19 crisis and lesson learned. We should also think that mostly blended design, building the resilient and also ICT-based activity are focused. In terms of the implementation of the existing plan in COVID-19 crisis situation, redesigning activity and recalculating the budgets are also necessary to carry out because of the crisis situation and limitation. Mostly, we need to follow reducing the contact, reducing crowd, physical distancing, frequently hand washing, and creating healthy and safe environment, and so on. Now in Myanmar, we are developing National Education Strategic Plan 2021 to 2030. Plan design and strategy will be necessary to consider response, recovery period, and future long-term period we need to consider. And then crisis-sensitive planning and education sector can be institutionalized in Myanmar. Planning process is quite different from normal planning process. For example, consultation are not face-to-face. Mostly budget consolidation we have to carry out. All plan development process are carried out by work from home, and also the using only online discussion or something like that. So plan design, strategy, and activity should be considered crisis sensitive. So this is important. The crisis management, crisis sensitive planning is important for the institutionalization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to each of you. We're now going to turn to the audience questions, and there are many. There was quite a lot of interest in IT, education technology, and how it was used. And I'm going to, so just for this panelist, just raise your hand if you want to respond, because many of these questions were to all of you. But there's a question about, is there any way that you are monitoring which students and how many students are actually listening or participating in radio, television-based distance learning programs or internet? And has there been any effort to disseminate IT devices to disadvantaged communities? So those are two questions. Mr. Abdi, do you know whether which students or how many students are actually participating in the radio or the TV programs? And did you send any iPads or anything like that out to rural areas?
Well, what we have done is we did a survey, an online survey on the use of the alternative means of curriculum delivery. And it was covering all the areas, radio, TV, and online platform. And therefore, whatever response we got was not, it was not very encouraging. We found out that a lot of the country was rather excluded. And that's why we took the decision of ensuring that once schools reopen, we'll continue the syllabus coverage from where we stopped. And therefore, we did some survey, which we did some 3 months ago. And in terms of distribution of hardware in form of radios and TVs, we have not done any so far. But what we have done is we did distribute some print materials, revision materials in form of textbooks that we have done in some parts of the country, specifically in our northern counties and the so-called marginalized areas, which we did. Thank you.
Thank you. Either Dr. Abushar or Mr. Kolewin, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, actually,
Please.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I can say one thing that before.
Okay, please.
I'm sorry.
We'll hear from Dr. Abushar, then I'll turn to Mr. Kolewin.
I'm sorry.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, actually, I can say one thing that before we gave the teachers to communicate with their students through WhatsApp and through many other platforms. But when we developed our platforms to be interactive, and which is more needed to see the attendance and to ensure that the student is following up on his topics for each and every class. Actually, we make it compulsory for the student to be on the platform and in the main platform or the ministry platforms. We give the times, we give each and everything. Actually, data was collected and we did many surveys upon this to ensure that reaching everyone. Now we are having a plan to disseminate or distribute many laptops to all students in rural area and poor area, and in a plan that to reach. And we are having big screens distributed also in the rural area and the schools, not for all the students, just for particular students. We have, I told you that we had 3 scenarios for attendance. Now in the minimum, like the persons or the students who doesn't know how to use the such equipment has to go to school for their in the school and get learned from their teachers. It is in a way we can say that trying to reach every student to make them equipped for the future and in using technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kolewin.
Okay, for the, I think there's a COVID pandemic situation at the school closure time. I think for the M&E monitoring and evaluation, how many students are, I think the seeing the studying and the Myanmar education, Myanmar digital education platform, as well as also the how many students will I think they view the television and how many students will view I think the lesson, the radio lesson or something like that. And this the situation, in my point of view, we our Ministry of Education have Myanmar digital education platform. This is online learning platform. We have also I think DBE, Department of Basic Education Learner Management System application. When the student and parent and all the teacher can enter this platform and study, at the time, the website as well as also the learner management system can also follow how many students are, I think, studying which lesson or something like that. We have that system. The other one is maybe for the, I think the how many students are listening the radio lesson, how many students are viewing the television lesson or something. For that, we have to conduct the survey for the student. Maybe survey is not maybe mostly the online survey we have to carry out for that. So Myanmar, we have also the trying to transmit the digital resource and material from online learning platform as well as also Ministry of Education website as well as also Ministry of Education Facebook and our Department of Education, Basic Education Facebook and website. And we have also the website and also the online the learning platform, and we use many mass media. And also we have to then distribute it to all the students to the hard copy or textbook. Maybe this will be either for the home-based learning. So at the time, maybe for the more likely, how many million of students receive the textbook, but need to follow how many students are actually learning at home by the support of friends or teacher or something like that. This should be then maybe carrying out by the online survey, not the face-to-face debut.
Okay, thank you. So it does seem clear that for all governments, it's going to be a continuing challenge to ensure that we're monitoring what's been working and getting feedback from the school level from education personnel, but that's difficult in countries where the connectivity is not universal. And so online surveys can't reach everyone. So special effort would be needed to ensure that we're not just hearing from those that are most advantaged, but also from those less advantaged, disadvantaged rather. There's an interesting question related to the equity question that we addressed earlier. And this one is specifically on gender. We know there's a lot known about the differential impact on females of these kinds of school closures and crisis. We've studied the situation under Ebola or other health crises. And there's widespread worry. UNESCO's talked a lot about this, about gender-based violence at home, girls not being able to put time into doing the remote learning because of having to take care of siblings or what have you. And school closes a safe space for many children, but particularly girls. And so the question is twofold. Did you do anything specific to address gender disparities in your response? And secondly, do you think that, and as schools are reopening and we're trying to assess learning loss, will you look specifically at the gender differences in this? Maybe we could hear, and if you're not doing something, I mean, it's to plant a seed coming from the audience. Dr. Abushar, is this an area that Jordan has worked on?
Actually, in gender-wise, actually, we did that through our questionnaire, what we distributed among even for the parents, for the students, and for the teachers, and this point of view was taken into account through many cases when we did the study. When we were back, we gave something in our manual, health manual, or returning. We said that for each and every school has to concentrate on such issues, because they are back to school for a long period of staying home, of some social and some different experiences there. There was some awareness on this side, actually. Actually, I don't think that it is main difference issue in between genders here in Jordan, because we are having the gender-wise is taking place and awareness all the times, and even through this pandemic crisis, what we had in Jordan. Yeah.
Mr. Abdi?
So, Madam Chair, I agree with you that during this closure, we have had, as a country, we have had challenges, especially that are gender-related. The long closures of schools usually expose the children to the ills of society, and also the challenge of schools generally are rescue centers, because when the child is occupied and going to school every time, then the well-being of the child is taken care of. We have had challenges, especially the way I mentioned earlier, on early pregnancies, challenges on early marriages. Some parts of the country, they are reported. But I would say that we had a program as a country where we were supporting our girls with the use of the sanitary pads and so on. And I would say that the fact that the schools were closed, we did not stop issuing that. We have been giving them, the sanitary pads were being issued still to the girls at that time. But also we have our Children's Protection Department that has a hotline. And in case of child abuse, maybe at home or anywhere, they were able to call the hotline, and the children were at least supported by government and given some form of protection. As for the cases of pregnancies and child defilement, we have had our local administrators that are decentralized level who are picking it up with the judiciary and the police and so on. And that has been also being addressed, I would say has been attended to. As we open the schools, of course, again, we'll continue supporting our girl child. And this country has also a school re-entry policy, where even those girls that maybe have fallen victim to issues to do with pregnancy and all that are still allowed to come back and continue with their education. So that again, we, under our gender in education policy, we're able to provide for the girls in that approach. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Kolewin.
Yes. Gender, concerning with the gender disparity, in Myanmar, we have no gender disparity in basic education sector. Mostly girls and I think boys enrollment are not so much different in basic education sector. But for the higher education in Tibet sector, maybe I think the girls are higher education sector, girls are more than boys in enrollment, according to the situation in Myanmar. So when we are when are developing the plan, at the time we use the I think gender sensitive planning. We will, if possible, like a development of the curriculum and new textbook by the education sector report now being implemented in Myanmar. When development of textbook, we are using the gender sensitive development process for the textbook development and teacher guide development. For that, mostly the gender sensitive planning is now we are using for the using gender lens for the possible like a textbook development. And maybe I think for the textbook, we will use the gender lens for the home gender disparity. We are using in the process of the development of the textbook or something like that. So for the gender, maybe in my point of view, gender is not different, only boy and girl. The other diversity in the society also, I think the link with the gender concept in my point of view. So mostly now we are using social inclusion concept for the planning and other development process. Over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're running out of time. There's a very many. The audience is very engaged and has sent in many questions. I'm just going to take a 4 more minutes to touch on some other stakeholders that we haven't given that much attention to. First of all, teachers. So I will just turn to one of you for this. What has been the role? Have teachers or teacher organizations been able to feed into the design of the contingency plan, the strategies chosen, the learning platforms chosen? And has teacher education continued during the pandemic? So which one of you would like to take that one? Raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Kolewin, go ahead, thanks.
I think for the I think the role of the teacher in the contingency planning, as I think for the education sector as well as also the teacher education sector. So it is a crucial and important role in our country, in Myanmar, mostly for the inclusive participation in the planning process, development of the development planning process, possible like a development of the teacher competency framework, development of the competency for the education officer, whatever we are developed, the teacher maybe need to be participate, teacher representative. In Myanmar, we have also the Myanmar Teacher Federation, and also the Teacher Federation for the higher education, Teacher Federation for the Tibet sector, teacher, and then also the Technology Teacher Federation or something like that. So they have to participate all the planning process, as well as not only the contingency planning, but also for the long-term plan development or every planning process, they have to participate. So they are very important role, crucial role for the planning, for the I think not only for the contingency, not only for the short-term planning, but also for the long-term planning for the future. Thank you. Over.
Okay, thank you very much. The next group, so it's very important that we put some attention to teachers. Because last week was World Teachers Day, and we don't give enough credit to teachers. Mr. Abdi, can I ask you to answer a question about parents? During the school closures, parents went back to the original role as children's first teachers, and there was a lot of reliance on teachers to manage, to guide home learning. Do you think that this is will cause the ministry to rethink its relationship with teachers, with parents rather? How do you think about the role of the parents going forward?
I think the role of the parents here is very critical. Here in Kenya, we talk of the three-legged stool: the student, the teacher, and the parent. And if you remove one of the legs, learning will not take place. And therefore, the parents are very critical. But I think with the coming of the pandemic, we are learning a lot, especially in improving this alternative method of curriculum delivery. And we're seeing parents are very crucial, especially in the education of their children. And it's something that we need to take up. But I just want to inform this discussion that parents here in Kenya are well organized in terms of at the school level. They have associations at the county level, regional, and at the national level. And therefore, alongside the teachers and other key stakeholders, they were involved in ensuring that we consider their views, and they've always been presenting to such an extent that our stakeholders of the country, even as we open schools starting this week, we don't have any divergent views. We're all united as a country because we work together in the process of reopening the schools, and all stakeholders' views have been considered. But also, we intend to thinking of how we can empower parents, parental empowerment in terms of even ensuring that, be it at the school level and so on, because that's the lowest level we can reach them, to kind of disseminate information on how they can be involved in teaching and learning of their children. Parents in the past maybe would just come, especially in the face-to-face form of curriculum delivery. They would want to visit the schools during annual general meetings and maybe meeting class teachers and tracking the progress of their children and so on. But I think time has come to ensure that they are also involved in the learning of their children.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Dr. Abu Shar, you've spoken, we're aware that private sector is an important player in Jordan. A couple of questions came up about the private sector. Did the Jordanian government enter into any arrangements with corporate sector for tech platforms, for example? Did you feel any pressure to take on certain platforms versus others? And overall, what do you see as the role of the private sector going forward? Understanding private sector is a very large umbrella, but thinking beyond just private schools. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, thank you. And in this issue about the private sector, actually, here I'm not talking about the schools and the private schools. I'm talking about the private sector, the technology companies, and they actually we had very advanced such kind of these companies which we relied on in the first pandemic. They are the one who's accelerating our distance learning and modified with us, along with us, the way of spreading such big platforms and to carry on with them. And I can say the private sector is the Jordan TV, which they gave us the lead for publishing or broadcasting our classes through. They wanted to give us 3 main channels, which is now they are I think it is the most followed by all audience. I can say that our private school here, they have got also a very good platforms which they are doing their rules in a manner to follow and to reach their children where we are now trying to have a compromise in between. That in such a situation, many of transferring of the student from private schools to public schools, and this is This is very known, and it has happened everywhere. So, and what we try to have a good compromise with the private school, that that our capacity, it is that 1, 2, 3, and their role, it is the most important to help the education sector. Actually, what about coordination here in Jordan? I do feel as a planner that really there is a good coordination with everyone, and especially now we are just in a way that to have some protocols with the private school is to how to utilize their also platforms, and to get it maybe mixed together. Though the government, our ministry is giving for each and every student IP, and they can enter our system in Jordan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, colleagues, to all in the audience, we are running out of time, and I'm sorry that we're not able to get to every one of your questions. There's a wonderful, rich set of questions, but we hope that by combining some of them, we've been able to answer some of them for you. I'm going to turn back to the panelists to make their closing remarks. And this is really about what conclusions do you draw for the future of educational planning and crisis preparedness in your country? What do you consider the most important success factors to planning to overcome a crisis? So these are your closing remarks, 2 minutes apiece. And I turn back to Dr. Abushar first, please. Thank you.
Actually, we just summarized some main issues, which is the new way of strategic planning and facing the crisis, and this is very needful now in the new planning, especially in each and every sphere of life, health and some other crisis which is facing the country. We should think of the planning now from new aspects, that the planning should while we plan, we should think of risk and how to overcome this risk. Second thing, it is the cooperation with private and public and some other sectors. It is not only, we are not talking about, as we said, only about education. We are talking now about home, about parents, about teachers, about everyone, where we should cooperate together. This is, as my colleague said from Kenya, that this is a nation-wise issue. It is not only the Ministry of Education. So the cooperation should be more allocated, and should be scaling in a way that everybody should do his role for education and for educate their children. Second thing, we can say the needed of training on the new ICT or the new technology in education. This is also a big issue. I can issue it. It is needed for everyone. This should be a culture in each and every country. I think also strengthening the ICT tools and internship and platforms and the internet. This is actually now, it has become a use of life. It is same like food, and it is same like water, which is needed for everyone. The telecommunication and reaching each other, and advance warning. This is also, I think, an issue should be put on the priorities, that warning should be there. We don't have to nobody thought that this Corona or COVID-19 have such impact on the floor in each and every country. And when we used to see the world, how it's going, we should actually be curious and thinking more and more about each and every other also crisis could happen in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. That's what we call a resilient education system.
Resilient,
Better
yeah.
prepared for the next crisis.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Mr. Abdi, your closing remarks, please.
I would say the future of education planning, especially for pandemic situations like this, we have no choice but to give meaning to the UN's suggestion or proposal, rather, that the right to connectivity is the right to education. We have to be prepared in such a way that learning is not interrupted. We need to virtually be able to deliver our curriculum. We need to virtually be able to monitor and evaluate our curriculum. We need to examine our curriculum virtually, and learning goes on. We need to, moving forward, ensure that we have improved health and hygiene in practices, with better practices in our institutions, providing the relevant infrastructure, water, and so on. We need to enhance the use of digital devices and ensure that the whole country is connected, and the aspect of gathering data virtually to ensure that all children are learning. The involvement of all the key stakeholders, parental empowerment, training teachers. We have to be the pandemic prepared moving forward and ensure that the education sector is not adversely affected the way it has been affected and so on. So moving forward, I think we should not be caught unprepared by another pandemic. We have to plan and consider this in our education planning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Kole-Win, you're...
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Susan. For the future educational planning and crisis preparedness in Myanmar, based on the experience in lesson learned in COVID-19 crisis, we need to consider that this crisis cannot be over within a short time, short duration. So we have to living together with COVID-19 within the society. For that reason, the crisis-sensitive educational planning and preparedness is important for all education planners. And in my point of view, scale for the crisis management and crisis-sensitive educational planning are required for all educational professionals. Most important success factor relating to the planning to overcome health crisis. Finally, when we face challenges, difficulty, and COVID-19 pandemic, we can consider that it should be an opportunity for the future, such as more encouraged to use ICT in education, and ICT for education also, more on online learning platform, and more education technology using, and more using application for the learner management system, and so on. The concept new normal is used in the future society, learning together with the COVID-19. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kole-Win. Thank you to all three of the panelists. We have all greatly benefited and learned a lot from your experiences, your country's experiences, and from your very astute reflections on these experiences. Thank you very much. We wish you, each and every one of you, and under your leadership, we wish your countries the very best in the future. And please be reassured that IIEP stands ready to continue to work with you into the future. It continues to be a privilege for us. So join me, please, in thanking the panelists. We've had wonderful, wonderful contributions from each and every one of them. Thank you. I would also like to take a moment to thank our interpreters, Nadia and Raul, for their support to ensure that we had French and English and that all of you could hear in one of those languages. And I'd like to thank my colleague, Michaela Martin, who organizes the strategic debate. And she is the one who got us all back together again, as we have not had a strategic debate since March. And finally, to say a word of thanks to the Strategic Debate support team, and these include Narit Mang, Julian Hamu, Aurelia Corto, and Camila Petrakis. Thank you to all of you for your support during this event. We hope that you will join us at the next strategic debate. It is going to focus on resilience of higher education. So very much the same theme of resilience, but looking at the subsector of higher education. This will be announced for a date in late November. So as you have registered for this event, you will get information on that date. We hope that you will join us and continue to participate in our strategic debate series. Thank you again for being with us, and we wish you very well. Bye-bye now. Thank you very much to Dr. Abushar, Mr. Abdi, Mr. Kolewin. Thank you.
Thank you, and stay safe, and hope to see you in the